What's up guys, how you doing? Welcome to another video. So today we're talking all about the Canon R6, and more importantly I'm going to talk about some of the myths that I think are out there. And the reason I call them myths is because actually they are problems that are quite widely talked about with the Canon R6, and things that actually I really don't think are issues at all, and quite often I think they are out there and being tagged as problems due to user error. And I thought it would be good to touch on 5 of the main ones today. Before we get into that, I'm going to ask you guys to do 2 things for me. Number 1, as I always ask you, hit the like button on the video, hit the thumbs up. It helps me out loads, it helps out my channel, it helps YouTube to think, hey, Rob makes some alright videos, maybe we should share them with other people. If you haven't subscribed already, think about it. It's crazy now. We've just passed 6,000 subscribers. It feels like 2 weeks ago we were talking about hitting 5,000 subscribers. And in fact, it was only 4 weeks ago. It's crazy. You guys have been hitting that subscribe button for me and I appreciate it. Thank you. So look, no messing around. Let's get into this. Let's talk about some of the myths with the Canon R6. Now, I don't have the camera in my hand to show you guys because actually you guys are on it over there. I'm filming on my R6 right now. The last R6 video I made, I actually filmed on my 7D2 and I wasn't as happy with the quality as I am from my R6. Another good thing I like about the R6. So today, you guys are on the R6, I'm sat over this side and we're just going to talk about it. So myth number 1, and that is all to do with the overheating. If you believed everything you read online, you would think that the Canon R6 and the Canon R5 overheat left, right and centre. You need oven gloves if you want to use those things. And frankly, it is mostly just not true. I made a whole video about the R6 overheating, or in fact not overheating. I'll link it right here if you want to go check that one out. I actually even think all the talk about the R-heating with the R5, now I've seen some real world kind of videos of people who've been using it for 6 months. It's such a small issue and only really happens if you're really filming really high resolution video for quite a long time. It's not really an issue at all with the R6 with video. If you were maybe to sit there and film 4K like constantly for ages, perhaps it would cause you a problem, but you're never really going to do that. And generally speaking, you'll be totally fine. With photos, forget about it. It just will not happen. Your R6 will not overheat taking photos. You do not need to worry about that. Okay, that is myth number 1 debunked. Let's move on to myth number 2. And that is all to do with the lag in the viewfinder. A lot of you guys will know, with the EOS R, there were some issues when you tried to shoot sports or action where you would get some lag in the viewfinder. It happened if you took a burst of photos, you'd then have that last photo kind of visible in your viewfinder just for a second, but it was enough for you to lose track of the action in the viewfinder, and it did make it quite difficult to use to shoot sports. A lot of people seem to have assumed that that is still a problem with the Canon R6. And in very simple terms, it's just not. It doesn't happen. You do have an image review in the viewfinder, but guess what you can do? You can turn it off, right? So you just don't have it on. And then you can track live action through the viewfinder. I'm shooting professional sports all the time with my R6. I'm tracking action fine, firing off a burst of shots, and straight back I can see the live view of what's going on in front of me. I'm not losing the action. You don't get the image review forced in your face. You don't get lag in the viewfinder. It works totally fine. Do not worry about it. Not a problem. Okay, myth number 3, and that is that you get loads of buffering issues with the Canon R6. A lot of people out there experience buffering issues. They say that they will take a burst of shots and that then the camera is catching up with the buffer so you can't review the photos you've taken. Now, don't get me wrong, those people aren't lying, they're absolutely right, that does happen, but it is caused by using memory cards that aren't fast enough. If you have the right type of memory cards in your camera, and I'm going to put a link in the description, and right here are the memory cards that I use, 250 megabytes per second, they keep up totally fine. I have 0 buffering issues. If you guys watched some of my earlier videos, when I was doing some tests, I had a couple, and then we reviewed it and I made a separate video with the new faster memory cards, and it wasn't a problem anymore. It hasn't been a problem since. If you use the right, decent memory cards, you won't have any problems with buffering. Okay, moving into myth number 4, and that is that you only get slow frame rates or slow frames per second if you are using EF lenses on your RF adapter on the R6. Now again, that just isn't true, or at least it isn't true in the way that a lot of people are understanding it. Now, that point comes from the fact that you won't necessarily get 12 frames per second on the mechanical shutter with some older EF lenses. For example, I did some tests using my EF 70-200. This is the IS Mark 1, so this is a pretty old lens. Now these weren't any like magical scientific tests. I literally sat there, fired off shots continuously, and roughly worked out how many shots I was getting per second. And my really simple, non-scientific tests gave me about 9 frames per second with this lens. 9 frames per second is not bad. I've been using this to shoot sports loads. Haven't had any problems with 9 frames per second. Yes, fine, it isn't quite the 12 frames per second that you could get if I was using the RF version of this lens. But at the same time, are those 3 extra frames per second worth the 4 times the price of that new lens? Maybe not, maybe for some people it is. But the other big thing that people just seem to bypass when they're talking about this subject is that if you're using the electronic shutter, you get 20 frames per second. Doesn't matter which lens you're using, old EF lens, brand new RF lens, doesn't matter. You will get 20 frames per second if you are using the electronic shutter. Now that leads us nicely into myth number 5, and that is that the rolling shutter issues with the electronic shutter are massive. They're huge. It's unusable. The rolling shutter is so bad you just cannot use the electronic shutter. Well, you know what? That's just rubbish. That is not true. I use the electronic shutter all the time. I have experienced some, and I say some, issues when I'm shooting really fast sports like basketball. But even then, when I say some, I could shoot a whole game and maybe I'd get a few frames that weren't quite good enough, but that would be it, a handful from hundreds. I shoot some slightly slower sports, and not slow sports, I'm talking football, soccer. I shoot those with the electronic shutter all the time. I'm putting up some photos right now, all of which were taken with the electronic shutter. I think it works really well. Not as bad as people make out, and in fact, not bad at all. Really, really good. And remember, that also will give you that 20 frames per second, so it's worth looking at. Shouldn't be dismissed because people think, oh, there's going to be massive rolling shutter issues. People out there have done reviews about it and they're taking photos of like fans spinning around, and it's like, yeah, of course, but that's not what you're going to be photographing. You're going to sit there and photograph a ceiling fan? No, you're probably not. So don't worry about it. It is not as much of a problem as people make out. So that gives us our 5 myths that we have debunked. But you know what? Seeing as we're here, we're going to do 6 because I've got a bonus one for you guys. And that is that a lot of people talk about loads of EF lenses, or the older EF lenses, not working with the RF adapter. And yeah, don't get me wrong, there are some that don't work, but it isn't many. Loads and loads of the older EF lenses work totally fine. For example, I'm using my 70-200 IS Mark 1, it works fine. I'm using my 400mm f2.8, again it's the Mark 1, the IS Mark 1, works fine, no problems at all with that. And I know there are plenty of other people out there using older lenses. So you know what, actually, to help each other out, comment below which older lenses are you using on the Canon R6 with the RF adapter and not having problems. Don't worry, I'm open to the fact that with some lens it might cause a problem, so if you've got one that doesn't work, whack that in the comments below as well, because it might help out some other people. But my point is here is that I think most people would believe that it's only the newest EF lenses that work with the adapter, and that's just simply not true. Loads of the older ones work totally fine. So guys, that just about rounds us off. That is us debunking 5, or in fact 6 myths about the Canon R6. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, do me a favour, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on the next video.